Hi everyone, so we might as well get started. It's just after 4 o'clock here in the UK. Welcome to this webinar. It's the first of a series of webinars this week we're going to do, and we're going to focus in on what's new in Google Workspace for Education in today's webinar. Before I get started, to introduce myself, my name's Andy Caffrey. I'm a Google Certified Innovator and Trainer, and I work with the team at Canopy, where I look after our focus on Google Workspace. So thanks for joining me. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. If you're watching live, feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining from over in the chat. And just to let you know, this session is recorded. So you'll be able to access the recording for this session from the calendar link you've come through today. After the recording is processed, you'll be able to jump in there and look at the recording for today's session. So welcome as we go through all the updates for this year and what's new in Google Workspace for Education. And there's been a load of things. Just to start with, I ought to call out where these updates come from. So if you've ever used Google Workspace and you ever thought, actually, I wish it had a feature or there's a request I want to make, you can hit the question mark button and you can go in to send feedback to Google and you can fill in feedback. And to be honest, not many people do. So if you put feedback in, you're probably one of the people that's responsible for driving forward some of the new features we're going to talk about today. So if there's something that's bugging you, or you've got an annoyance, or you wish you did something in a smart way, always go in there and put the feedback in. Before we get into the updates, just to call out a few things, as a lot of you may know, there's different versions of Google Workspace available. And so there is the fundamentals version, which is the free version. And then there are versions above that are paid versions, which is standard, the teaching and learning upgrade to upgrade individual teachers, and education plus. As we go through the webinar today, I'm going to clearly call out which edition this affects. So if a feature happens to be an upgrade to one of the paid editions, I'll call that out. If it's everybody, I'll call that out. And obviously we now also have Gemini in this space. So if it's something that's in the paid Gemini licenses, I'll call that out too. So just to be really clear, obviously there's lots of different features in Google Workspace. Still a huge amount of the stuff is free. And if it's an upgrade to a free feature, it goes into the free package. But obviously if they're upgrading something that's already a paid feature, then it goes into one of those features. So I'll call that as we go through, but just to be clear about the different versions that you might be using as a school as we go into these updates. Okay. So let's get started. And I want to start with one of my favorite topics in Google Workspace, because it's one that's received quite a lot of updates recently, and that is some of the accessibility features that are coming in across Google Workspace. And there's really been a shift in Google into building accessibility at the browser level. So sitting inside the Chrome browser rather than building into individual projects. So rather than having accessibility in docs and then sheets and then slides separately, this idea of putting it in at the browser level. So some of the updates in accessibility. Again, there's an example of a slide here, and you can see this is coming to all editions. So the first one is, we've known for a long time that if you put a video on YouTube, it captions it at the bottom, makes it more accessible. So that feature has now come across to Google Drive. So if you upload your video, your content for students, you record a little video, maybe even the recording of this meet, it'll go into my Google Drive, and then Google Drive will automatically generate a set of captions linked to the video. So Drive videos now becoming as accessible as the ones on YouTube. Previously, you had to sort of do a YouTube workaround for this. So bringing that into Google Drive natively just makes it much more accessible for people who want to access a video in that way. So first update. Next one is some to the Chrome browser. And in fact, I'm going to drop out of my slides at this point. And I'm going to just share my screen in so I can demo this in a bit more detail with you. So here I am on the internet. I've just gone to let's go and find a newspaper article. So here I am on the BBC News website. And obviously this contains a lot of information on this page. So I've got all these other stories on the right-hand side here, got lots of different content on there. And this might not be accessible for all users. So now we have something called reading mode in Google Chrome. And in reading mode, I can go to this little button here to go to reading mode. So I've got it pinned on my bar. But if you don't see it there, you can go to the 3 dots, because 3 dots means more in Google Workspace. And you can go down here and find reading mode in this list here under more tools. So more tools and reading mode if it's not there, but I've already got it at the top. So I'll click it. Once you turn on reading mode, I've got mine set quite wide, so you can sort of choose the width here. But as you can sort of see, what it's doing is it's clearing away all the other stuff that lives around this article, and it's effectively making it more accessible, making it easier for me to read this article. And the sort of the style and color is down to you to choose. So as you can see, I can play around with the font size here, make the font bigger or smaller if I want to. I can play around with the particular font I'm using, and all these fonts in reading mode are sort of dyslexic friendly fonts. Things like Poppins and Lex Endecker are much more accessible for students. And I can also change the color. So as a teacher, I remember having to do things on yellow paper and on blue paper for different students, or I might need to do a coloring version for students with visual needs. So I can make this page effectively more accessible to my users. So that's what reading mode looks like when we read it. You might also notice now, and this is new in reading mode, that I've got this play button here. When I press play, effectively it reads back the article to me using a natural reading voice. So rather than me having to read it, I can also use reading mode, hit the play button, and it will play it back. I can vary the playback speed here. I can also change the voice if I want to, and there's a range of different natural voices in there. So if there's one voice I prefer over a different voice, I can choose the voice. And all of this reading mode is built in at the Chrome browser level. And that means it's coming to you if you use the Chrome browser across any device. So you might be on Windows using the Chrome browser, you might be on a Chromebook using the Chrome browser. But by building accessibility into the browser, it just means it's there for everybody. It's irrelevant what the website is. I don't need the website to do anything. Building that accessibility into the browser just makes it a lot easier to get to. So that's one of the updates in terms of reading mode in Chrome browser. So we've talked about that one. Also in the updates, Chromebooks in particular are getting more upgrades in terms of accessibility. Some of these have launched already and some of them are still coming soon. So we've got the ability to recognize optical character recognition, so recognize text within PDFs and docs. Natural sounding text to speech is what we just saw. But also this one on the right-hand side here, and this hasn't launched just yet, is the ability to control your Chromebook using facial expression and head movement. So if the use of the mouse is challenging for you, this ability to use the camera in the Chromebook to control the device. Again, these are on-device accessibility improvements that just make Chromebooks a more accessible feature. And when I say Chromebooks, that would also apply to Chrome OS Flex devices that obviously meet the requirements. So for that one, you're going to need a camera on a device for that to work. But if you've got those requirements, then that's going to come to those devices as well. So a range of sort of new accessibility tools there coming into Google Workspace. Now let's look at some of the products, some of the updates that are coming into particular products as we go through. And we're going to start with Google Classroom because it's a popular one. So things that are new in Classroom. The first one is actually links back to Chromebooks. And this is the idea that we can now the Chrome OS interface, the little calendar in Google Chrome, will include pop-ups about the work due in Google Classroom. When I was working in school, the students weren't always overjoyed. I kept reminding them about their work. I don't know whether they're going to be overjoyed that the Chromebook will now also pester them about their work. But that building that Chrome into the Chromebook, so the Chromebook's got a sense of where you are, what's due, sort of linking Classroom and Chromebooks together in a better way. And that's obviously coming to anyone that's got a Chromebook in terms of the upgrade to that feature. Also, to come into all editions of Google Classroom is this ability to add a missing state to Google Classroom. So if I jump across into my classroom here, I'm in a Google Classroom here. Previously, you had to put a score in for everything, didn't you? So when you were marking students' work, you had to put a score in. And then the thing was, well, what happens if they weren't there? What happens if they were absent that lesson? Do I put a 0 in? Because a 0 means I'm going to create a much lower average for them, so I'm sort of mathematically stuck. Or do I leave it blank, or what do I do if they're not there? So now this ability to put other things in, we can excuse an assignment. And when we excuse an assignment, we're saying, actually, this person didn't do this for maybe genuine reasons, and we move on. So it doesn't affect overall averages and grades. It's just one of those sort of really sensible solutions that probably was frustrating people using the Markbook previously. So just a simple little update there into Markbooks in Classroom. While I'm in Classroom, a couple of other upgrades in the classwork area. So if I go create an assignment in Google Classroom, this is one that actually came out a while ago, but was, I have to say, one of the most frustrating features about Google Classroom for a long time was that when you created an assignment, if you remember previously, you could set it to multiple classes at once. So I can pick multiple classes here. But if I pick multiple classes, previously I couldn't then schedule an assignment. But I can now do multiple classes and then go to schedule and pick different dates for that to drop out. So if I'm sort of trying to be very organized with my work and I want to plan on my work on a Monday morning, I could go and create all my assignments, go through and pick all the different times for them to drop. So this idea of scheduling multiple classrooms, but in one go from this one easy page, or copying the same time for everybody and launching something whole school wide, is now available in Google Classroom. Previously, you could either schedule or you could go multiple classes. You couldn't do both. So now there's a feature for doing both. So again, a nice simple update there in Classroom. Also, while I'm on this page, something new, it says it's called out as a new feature right now. Let me just unselect my classes so I can show you this. But this ability, obviously, to select individual students has always been there in Google Classroom. But this new feature is the ability to create predefined groups in Google Classroom. Now, this is a paid upgrade feature. It's the first one we've seen in Classroom. But this idea is I can pre-create groups. So if I'm teaching in a school and I've got a group of students, maybe in my classroom, they sit in different ability groups, and I want to create those ability groups so I can just assign work to them consistently. Previously, I had to go to the student list and pick them all off individually and sort of create those groups every time. Now I can pre-create those groups and again, pick them up quickly, time after time. So effectively, it just smooths that workflow. If you're going to do adaptive teaching and assign different work to different students, it just smooths that work through, flow through a bit in Google Classroom. So that's the schedule. We talked about schedule. That's the differentiate instruction with student groups. But this is only to teaching on an upgrade and Education Plus. So pre-building groups in Classroom. Also in Classroom, and this is an Education Plus feature because it tracks what people are doing, is the ability to track whether students are interacting with work. So imagine you assign a piece of work and some students don't even click on the doc to open it. We've all been there, and to be honest, frequently we know who those students are. But this ability now to look at their interaction with the doc and see where they're at with it is just a more detailed analytical look at interactions with work in Google Classroom. So based on their activity, in Google Drive attachments, we can filter those students. Read Along has been out for quite a while, and just to be clear, Read Along is available for anyone to use as an Android and iOS app, and parents have used it for quite a number of years to help teach students to read. But Read Along came out in Google Classroom, and Read Along allows students to read to a Chromebook, and it monitors their reading and it moves them forward and listens to and gives you data on their reading. That's been out for a while. But the feature I wanted to call out was a newer feature that right now is out in a pilot. And I will share the slides with you later so you can click all the links in my slides. But this is a pilot, and it seems to me to be a really sort of interesting use of AI. Because after you've used Read Along a number of times, Read Along starts working out what words you don't know because you struggle with them. Every time you're presented with them, you struggle with them. And this pilot is around using generative AI to create new stories that don't previously exist, that use the words that you as an individual learner are struggling with. And to me, this is a really interesting and actually good use case for AI, because as a teacher, I'm going to have a range of abilities in my class, different students reading at different levels, and I'm not going to necessarily be able to write individual stories for all of them. So it strikes me as a really sort of practical use of some of the AI tools we're seeing to provide some personalized learning. It's a pilot right now, so you can sign up for the beta. I'll share the links afterwards anyway via email for all this stuff. But if you're interested in that, if you're using Read Along and you want to take it a bit further, then you can sign up. And if you get on the pilot, obviously you could help bring that feature forward. Another new thing in Google Classroom is a slight variation on sort of showing people, parents in particular, parents and guardians, access to Google Classroom. So we've always had that ability in the people page to sort of add parents and guardians and to send them emails, and parents can sign up for daily or weekly emails. That feature's been there for a number of years. But this new place is a link that you can share with them so they can look at the classroom page. So previously, if you think about the emails, it wasn't very instant. You didn't get the email to the end of the day. Sometimes the student had done the work before the email was sent out to parents. And it wasn't something that when a student wants to look at something, they could just click and look. So it wasn't very sort of real time in many respects. The idea of sharing a link obviously makes it more real time. So this Share with Guardians button gives me a link. I then send that link out to the parents, and it allows them to view the classwork page that's been assigned. They can't click on any of the links. So they can't dig into work. They can't start opening the docs and things up or looking at the student's individual work. They haven't got that level of access. But if they're trying to do what homework have you got or what have you done today, it just gives them that overview of the page. I've always said this about parent guide and access. As a school, you need to consider carefully if you're going to give access to parents, because you, as a teacher, you need to sort of write in the style that's appropriate if parents who weren't in the lesson are going to see the work. And the way in which you write often changes. I can't just write, finish off the work from today if you weren't in the lesson. So you need to think about that carefully if you're doing parent access. So, update to parents, guardians there. So that's Classroom. And by the way, as I'm going through these features, if you have any questions, feel free to drop questions in the chat and I'll jump and do some questions in Q&A at the end if we get time once we go into all the features. Next up in the sort of updates, let's talk about Gemini. The first thing to be really clear about is that Gemini is available to all users who are aged over the 18 who use Google Workspace. So it's in all our editions. It's in Fundamental, Standard, Plus, Teaching and Learning. Even in the free edition, Gemini is there. But it has to be turned on by the admin console. And it can only, for those of you watching in the UK at least, be accessed by students who are aged over 18 that are labelled as over 18 in the admin console. So sometimes I meet teachers who haven't got access to Gemini, and it's not because they're under 18, it's just because no one's labelled them as an adult in the console. It does updates to Gemini. So if you're using the Gemini chat, which lives at gemini.google.com, you have access to this page. And the recent update is the one that you can see called out at the top of my page here, which is that there's added data protection now. So anything I put in this prompt box down here isn't used to train the model in Gemini. So we're in a much more data secure environment, and effectively it's following the permissions of my admin console. So previously in Gemini and in lots of other AI models, stuff you're putting in is used to sort of train and teach the model. Now what we're seeing is a more secure version of Gemini when we're signed into an education account. So it allows people to open this up. And what we're seeing now is lots of schools feel more confident about letting staff onto this because it's a bit more secure, it's a bit more sort of locked down. It is there, you turn it on, it's available for everyone to use, and it genuinely sort of helps people in terms of their time saving and workload. So that's there, it's the free version of Gemini, it's in Google Workspace. As you probably also know, there are some licenses around Gemini, and there is a paid version of Gemini as well, which sort of integrates Gemini with Google Workspace. And sometimes I get asked by people, what's the difference between the two? Is it worth paying when actually I can just use Gemini and copy and paste stuff out? And actually, when we look at the key difference, it isn't really about the connection. It's about what the model has access to. So if I show you an example of this, I'm going to drop over to my Google Drive. This account has got a Gemini license on it, so I can see the sort of the Gemini thing at the top here. But I can also right-click on anything in my drive, so I can right-click on this file here, which at the moment it's just got an AQA and a load of stuff in there, and I can ask Gemini about a particular file. And if I had to summarize what the difference was between the two, it's this idea that Gemini can see my files. That is one of the big differences between the two. So what's happening now is Gemini is reading this document, and over on the right-hand side here, and we'll see how quickly it does it, it's just providing me with a summary of what this document is about. And then it's allowing me to ask further questions of that document. So suddenly I can start to focus Gemini in on a particular topic. So if I suddenly want a scheme of work or I want some resources, the fact that Gemini can see into my drive means it's more likely to get specific resources in there. So if I come over to Google Slides, I come into my slide deck here, I can ask it. In fact, I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to not confuse it because I don't want to mess my slides up. And I'm going to go to slides.new. I'm going to use that shortcut to get to things quickly. And then I can bring Gemini in at the side when it loads up. And I can ask it at this particular point to build me slides. So I can say, in this case, create a new slide on Google Classroom. And what Gemini is now doing is it's building the slide for me. So it's going to come with the slide hopefully in a moment. But it's also looking at my Google Drive. It's looking at what is it that Andrew knows about Classroom. What's the drive tell me about Classroom? So it's a much more filtered view. I'm going to leave that running because it might take a bit of time because my drive's quite big, and I'll come back to it and we'll see how it's got on in a second. So that's Google Drive and Gemini and the integration between those two, and that's sort of moving forward. As a side panel in Gemini is the latest feature there. The other thing that's on Pilot is that the Pilot is out there for Gemini in Classroom. This is not a general release yet. This is a pilot. This is a new thing. And this is about focusing Gemini on what Classroom does. So things like creating lesson plans, creating adaptive teaching resources for students. The pilot is a sign-up pilot. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for a pilot. And I'll share all the links after this session. But Gemini is starting to appear inside Classroom. Let's go and see if my slide is generated. Okay, so it's generated some content here about Google Classroom. It's not the best image in the world. Sources here. These are the slide decks that it's used to generate this. So it's actually sourced this slide from a series of other slide decks within my drive. So it's sort of amalgamating stuff. And that's a really good example of the differences between the two. The version of Gemini Workspace pulls from Drive. Okay, so that's all the Gemini stuff. If you're interested in the AI stuff, we're doing a focused webinar tomorrow at 4 o'clock, focusing purely on Gemini and all those features. So we're digging into that more detail. Now let's talk about the editors. And by editors, we mean doc, sheet, slides, and now a new editor in Vids. So updates here. Firstly, a load of new handwriting fonts. And this is something that lots of teachers ask me about all the time, which is there's obviously a range of different styles of handwriting font that different people in different locations use. Google has uploaded 51 new handwriting fonts into the font library in Google Workspace. So I would hope that we're now covering a sort of a range of different styles that people would want to see in there. Again, it's out at all editions. So if you have access to Google Workspace, you've got access to the 51 new handwriting fonts to use across docs, sheets, slides, wherever you're typing. So yep, cursive fonts are finally in there, Stuart. One that's been actually out for some time, and again, this is in all the tools. It's in docs, sheets, and slides. A lot of people don't know this exists, but if you type in a mathematical formula, even in docs, Smart Compose, which is the smart chips in there, will answer the maths equations for you. So if you put in sums and mathematical sums into docs, it will start to solve mathematical equations for you. So that's mathematical equations coming into Smart Compose across all the editing tools in Google Workspace. I know maths teachers may love or may hate that upgraded feature. Also, this one's actually a beta out right now. Some people probably know that it's possible now in the admin console to restrict what people can do. You can create rules to restrict what can be shared. So I might, for example, prevent the sharing of student data through spreadsheets outside my Google Drive. Previously, when people went to share it, they weren't overly clear why the restriction was in place. So now what will happen in Google Workspace is if you try and share something and there's a rule at the school that says you can't do it, you will get these restrictions are applied. So that restrictions bar that you sort of see appearing there in that example will tell you that this document contains something, maybe it's student data, maybe it's passport details, whatever it is that's flagging to Google, and that's why we're not letting you share it. So just again, this idea of locking data in for people who want to do that, locking data in a bit more securely, but at the same time being clear with the end users why that lock is taking place. So that update's rolling in. This one's a paid update feature. So this is the first one of this section where it's an Education Plus feature. And this is being able to send Google Docs and for signatures. Lots of people use third-party tools for this, like Adobe Acrobat Sign thing. Probably should know what that's called. But now in a Google Doc, you can request a signature. And what it does is it creates a PDF of the Google Doc, sends it to the person whose email you put in, they sign it, sends it back to you, you get it in your email, and it's a signed document. So there's a fully fledged signature system built into the paid edition, into the Education Plus edition of Google Workspace. It creates a PDF of the Google Doc at the moment you request it. And that's actually for obvious reasons, because obviously a doc can be edited. So I don't want to sign something that you're going to edit after I've signed it. And that's why you sign a PDF. So we're locking that doc at one moment in time, somebody's signing off on it, and then coming back. For schools who've got Education Plus, this is often a feature they're paying for elsewhere. They can just bring in-house to Google that. And then sort of the last of the big updates from Google is this one, and that is the creation of Google Vids. Now, Vids is in the paid edition, so it's an Education Plus feature, and there's actually sort of two versions of it. So just Vids, the ability to edit videos, is in Education Plus. So anyone with the Education Plus license can use Vids. And then the bit where you use AI to generate the video, that requires the Gemini license. So there's sort of two different levels of Vids. To create a video, you need to go to, like anything, you need to probably start your journey in Google Drive. And then you can go to New and Google Vid. I'm just going to change account to my account that's got Google Vids on. So I'm in the wrong account here. So you can see from an education point of view. I can then go New. And we've always had these doc sheets and slides, but now you see I see Vids in there. And when I load up Vids, what this is a native video editor inside Google Workspace. So I've got this, at this point, blank video. And then I can start to create my scenes. And then when I use the video editing tool, it's probably familiar with this sort of concept of creating scenes and being able to create video content in Google Workspace. This content, this video I'm creating, behaves like any other doc sheet or slide in Google Workspace. I can share it in Classroom. I can use Make a Copy for each student and all those features. If you're interested more in Google Vids, then on Thursday this week, we're doing a webinar where we just focus on Google Vids as it's the newest tool inside Workspace. So this week on Thursday, we're going to focus in on Vids, but Vids is new, so it needs to get a mention today. So that sort of wraps up. It's exactly half an hour, brings me to the end of today's webinar. We have got some more webinars coming this week. So if you are interested in the webinars, on tomorrow night, we're focusing on Gemini and how to get the most from AI. Wednesday is Canva and getting started with Canva for Education, and Thursday is Google Vids. And we have a question about is Vids fully rolled out? So Vids is rolling out, but it does need turning on in the admin console. And I will check whether it's in beta, but I think it's on full rollout now because I'm seeing it on the bulk of my accounts, if that makes sense. Because as you probably know, when a new feature rolls out in Google, it rolls out over a number of weeks. So I will cross-check that for you, Simon. But Vids is rolling in. Let me just check for other questions as we get to the end of this. It's possible to enable Gemini just for staff, not students. Yes, it is. You can do it by OU, but the age restriction would also prevent students. I think we answered that one earlier. I don't know what Elizabeth's question was, but I hope we answered it. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. I'm going to sit around and answer more questions people who want to ask. I'll stop the recording. So if you're watching the recording, thanks for watching. If anyone else wants to hang around and ask questions, I'll more than happily